recording the session now. So it has started. And also, after this session, we will make sure we send the recording to you so that you can also follow at your own pace in case you had internet challenges whilst it was going on. So those are the few ground rules that we have. So without wasting much time, I will introduce to us all our first facilitator or our first presenter in the person of Mr. Charles Kojo Van Dyke. So I will give us a little background on our facilitator. So Charles Kojo Van Dyke is a social justice activist and a thought leader with experience in strengthening civil society resilience, sustainability, and civic leadership. He is a member of the Global Governance Board of the Innovation for Change Network. Charles is also a founding member of the International Consortium on Closing Civic Space, an initiative of the Center for Strategic and International Studies. He currently serves as a member of the governing board of African Risings, a Pan-African movement of people and organizations working for justice, peace, and dignity. He is a core team member of the Reimagining INGOs initiative. Charles also serves as the head capacity development unit at the West Africa Civil Society Institute, WACSI. He is a member of the Development Studies Association, United Kingdom, and a certified Change the Game Academy Master Trainer and an IFC Learning and Performance Institute trainer. Charles, we are very honored to have you today. The floor is yours. I hope you all enjoy this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stella, and welcome to everyone. And thank you so much for this invitation to speak about a very important topic. So just my utmost thanks to the tech team at WACSI for this opportunity to share with colleagues from the region and even beyond the region some of our perspectives on how we can make remote working work for us and not against us, especially in these very uncertain times. You would agree that these are very challenging times. These are very uncertain times, but I sincerely believe that in the midst of these difficulties that we are all experiencing, we can position our organizations through remote working, not only to survive, but most importantly, I believe, to thrive. And so I would like to begin this conversation by really looking at the themes or the theme for today's conversation. There are three concepts within that theme that I think are extremely important. The first concept is resilience. The second concept is adaptation. And then the third concept is remote work. So the question is, then what is resilience? When we speak about resilience, because this is a word that has been mentioned a lot within our sector when it comes to us being able to sustain our organization, sustain our operations, and then our growth. So it's a very popular word. But what is it? So resilience is the capacity and capability to recover from a difficult or unpredictable event or events, right? So it's our capacity to go through a specific difficulty and recover from that difficulty and still stay the course and pursue our agenda, our mandate, our causes. That means we are what? We are resilient, right? So today we are looking at resilience, but we are not only looking at resilience, we are also looking at adaptation. And so the question now is, what is adaptation? It's also about our capacity and our capability to alter or to change our functions, to change our structure, to change our form in response to either internal changes within our space or our organizations, our associations, our groups, or external changes outside our groups and associations and organizations, right? And the ability to adapt means our ability to change so that we can continue our course, but not only to continue our course, but to also improve, right? So that is adaptation. So the conversation today is about resilience and what? And adaptation. But it's not just in a vacuum. It's about resilience and adaptation in a remote working era. So then you would ask, what is remote work? And now we've become very familiar now, especially since COVID-19 hit, with the idea of remote working. And usually when we speak about remote working, we're talking about an arrangement where a member of a group, of an organization, or you may call it a staff member, a partner, works from another location, away from where that organization's office is, right? So it can be outside of that organization's office at home or some other place, or it can be totally out of that country of operation. And so that is remote working, or that is remote work. So the question we are asking today is, or the question about resilience and adaptation is, how do we develop and nurture our organizations, our groups, our associations in a remote working era to withstand the adversity and grow despite the challenges that we face in our communities and in our countries, right? And we face very serious challenges, COVID restrictions, the impact of COVID on our operations, etc. So how can we position ourselves to leverage on the fact that we need to remote work, but to continue to achieve our mandate, but not only that, to continue to grow, right? And to continue to make an impact in the communities we find ourselves. So before I dive into that, I want us to, base this conversation on some evidence about remote working. So there's a group called the Skills Masters Market, LLC. They are based in the US. And so they did a very interesting global survey last year, right? They interviewed organizations in the nonprofit sector, not only in the global north, but also the global south and also the global east, Asia, etc. And they asked a couple of questions. When they interviewed these organizations, there were certain responses, I think very interesting responses that I would like to share that came out of that survey. Out of that survey, 66% of the organizations they talked to, right, workforce, were working remotely. So at the time they did this survey in 2020, 66% of the organizations that were surveyed were working remotely or had instituted some form of remote working. 43% of that workforce said that they want to keep the remote work option. So 43% of that 66% said that they want to keep remote working as part of their operations for the long term. And then 20% of the employers had begun exploring and experimenting with remote working options. 20% of the people in that survey said that they were exploring with remote working options. And I can count, I think, Waxy as part of that 20%, because we also started exploring with remote working, and we developed a policy to shape the way we want to remote work. And that's something that I'll be speaking on later. But they went ahead to ask specific questions to this group, which I think are very interesting. They asked the group, so what are the benefits since they've been practicing this remote working? What do they think are the benefits of remote working? And it produced some very interesting feedback. And so most of the organizations said that, look, because we are not limited to a specific geographic scope. We can actually get human resources, or we can get potential staff from within our geographic, outside our geographic scope, outside the towns in which we find ourselves, outside the cities in which we are located. So a greater pool of resources for us, and they can still work for our organization, even though they are not within our geographic scope. That was one advantage. The other advantage most staff said was that they were happy that it did not affect their pay and benefits, that even though they were working remotely, they still got their full pay and they still got their full benefits. And I thought, for me, when I heard that, I smiled. I said, yes, these are, you don't want to touch people's pockets. So they were very, very, very happy about that. Another advantage was the fact that they felt that they saved a lot of money in terms of transportation costs and also in terms of time. So back in the days, when we are working, what happens? We need to take some form of public transport, or we need to get into our cars, we need to drive to work, and we need to go through traffic. Those of us who live in cities where there's so much traffic, it became a challenge, sometimes getting to work on time. By the time you get to work, you're even exhausted, etc. So the cost of saving fuel, even in that process, and also just the physical and mental exhaustion, was something that they thought was also an advantage. The fourth advantage that was also said about remote working was the fact that some people felt that they had less interruptions in their space. So those who were working from home in their own workstation, they didn't feel that they got interrupted by colleagues, by meetings, by other things that were happening in the office, and that they had some form of higher autonomy. So they felt more productive because they had a quiet space, they were by themselves, very few interruptions. So these were some of the benefits that were shared through that survey. But there were also disadvantages or challenges that were shared in that survey. One of them is related to mental health. A lot of people feel isolated, right? And because a lot of people felt isolated, they missed talking to colleagues, they missed meeting colleagues physically. Some even said they suffered from some form of depression. So isolation was a big issue. And then also the fact that, when you are remote working, you are not visible to many people, right? You are kind of disconnected, you are in your own space. A lot of colleagues may not see you unless you switch on your camera in a meeting. If you have internet challenges, you may not be able to even switch on your camera because of the internet connectivity issues. So you become less visible. Then there was an issue of maintaining a proper work-life balance, because remember, a lot of people are working from home, and home is supposed to be a space where you rest away from work, a space where you unwind, a space where you can do other things. But now that you're working from home, how do you balance that with your own personal life? So a lot of people found themselves working even more because of this remote working, and working beyond hours because people were so much accessible online. And so the work-life balance and self-care issues became very, very, very challenging. And so another issue that was raised in terms of a disadvantage was that it affected relationships among co-workers. And so because we are very, should I say, a communal society. We like to meet, we like to engage physically, we like to hug, we like to talk to each other, we like to see each other's faces. And because of all this, because of the fact that people were not able to do this, what happened was that the relational kind of dynamics between co-workers started to be affected. And so these are some of the disadvantages of remote working. But all in all, from the responses from the survey, it was clear that there was an agreement that remote working had come to stay as a key strategy of operations for nonprofits, not only in West Africa, but beyond. So now the question now is, how then do we develop a strategy that makes remote working work for us? Remember what I said earlier, how do we make sure remote working works for us and not against us. So I would like to share a few pointers, a few guidelines on how I believe this can be done. So every organization, group, or association must determine why it's instituting remote working, right? You have to determine it. You have to ask yourself, why are we using this as an option of working? Then you have to take steps to align its practices and actions that make sure that remote working works in your space. So what I'm saying is that every organization must look at its history, its mandate, its culture, and the way it's been operating to define a unique remote working model that suits them. And that is what the challenge now is. How do we, each one of us, based on what we do, where we find ourselves as organizations, define a unique remote working model that suits our organizational operations and culture? And I believe there are three things that need to be done. The first thing is that you need to set clear remote working expectations, and we'll go deeper into that. The second thing is that you need to develop remote working capacities and capabilities. And then the third thing is to create and integrate a remote working culture in operations. So I believe that these are the three things that need to be done. Now, with respect to setting clear expectations, and it's important, I believe that people need clarity in terms of what you expect from them so that they can actually deliver and actually feel like, enjoy the work that they are doing. So personally, on a personal level, I've always believed in policy and guidelines because I believe that policy and guidelines provides a formal kind of roadmap for collective action on a specific issue, right? So it reduces subjectivity and personal kind of preferences and actions, right? So I think the first thing that I believe needs to be done is the development of a remote working policy or guideline. And so at WAXI, this is something we did. We came together and developed a remote working policy because we knew that we had to set clear expectations about remote working, right? And in this policy and guideline, we needed to tackle specific issues. So if you are thinking about doing remote working, when you are developing a policy and guideline, you need to think about several issues. And I'll just speak to those issues very, very quickly. First of all, you need to define what is the purpose and objectives of remote working. So why are you doing remote working in your organization? What are you trying to achieve? What are the objectives of this type of or way of working, right? That has to be very clear in the policy. Then you have to also answer questions of eligibility, right? So who is eligible to remote work? And you need to look at your operations because sometimes you need to determine which staff members are suitable. There may be certain roles, right, and responsibilities that will be difficult in terms of remote working, right? It may be difficult. So you need to determine in which conditions can staff members remote work, who is eligible, what are the responsibilities of that staff member? If they are remote working, do they have the proper equipment right? Have you given them the tools that in their homes? Do they have a workspace, right, that they can use to remote work? What are the tax and legal implications of remote working? So, for example, in WAXI, the current head of knowledge management and communication is working now out of Yaoundé, right? And he's working in terms of a planned remote work, right, long term. So what are the tax implications? Does it mean that we will have to pay taxes in that location, or do we still pay taxes in Ghana? All these things are things you need to consider because that type of remote working model means that somebody is working there from a long term. It's not an occasional remote working model. So these are all the issues that go into eligibility. Another issue you have to look at is the type of remote working arrangement. So what is the type of remote working arrangement? Is it a planned remote working arrangement or is it an occasional remote working arrangement? Now, with a planned one, it's a longer term kind of arrangement, right? And the person knows that he's working out of a specific country, away from the head office or away from the secretariat, right? It's planned for a long term. But then there's occasional remote working, which we are also doing in Waxy, because we are doing a shift system. It means occasionally some of us work from home while others are in the office in order to prevent, because of COVID-19 restrictions and regulations, and to ensure that we ensure the safety of staff. So we are doing a shift system. So we are also doing occasional remote working. So what does that mean? You need to define that in the policy. You need to state, is this something that is approved case by case? How is approval done? How many days should people remote work in a month, for instance? And who gives that approval? So those are the two types of remote working arrangements: planned remote work and occasional remote work. Then, of course, you have to answer questions about expectations or work expectations, right? How many hours do you expect staff to work remotely? Is it the same 8 hours like the normal job, like everybody else if they were in the office? Should they be accessible within that period, right? And how should they be accessible? Should they also be using the tools that other staff are using? So for example, if you're using Office 365, you're using Teams, etc., as staff to engage. The person who's also working remotely should be accessible on those platforms. The person should be able to attend specific meetings, right? That means there should not be any liability or sort of hindrance because the person is working remotely from doing their normal work. And so this should be laid out in terms of work expectations. And then issues of communication, right? So if the person is working out of Cameroon, for instance, there's a different time zone, right? Should that be taken into consideration, right? How is this person supervised? Is this person given some amount of data? Or, so for example, at Waxy, because we do occasional remote working and to an extent planned remote working with one person, we are given a data. Okay, we are given a data so that we can use internet where we find ourselves. So what would the organization do in that? That should be documented under communication. And then issues around compensation, right? So how are you compensating the staff who are working remotely? Is their salary different from the others, or is the same? When they are making expenses in terms of phone calls, what happens? Because they don't have access to the staff phones now, or the landlines, and if they are using their personal phones, what happens? So you need to determine all these. What's the policy around that? And then, of course, you have to answer questions of equipment. Do they have the right equipment? If they are working with the equipment and it gets damaged in their homes or where they find themselves, what are they supposed to do? Or if those equipment needs repair, what are they supposed to do? You need to answer that question. You also need to answer questions of the workspace, information security, right? How to handle information, because you are outside, you are remote. What are the measures that have been put in place to ensure that information is secure, right? And then, of course, safety. Where are they working from? Is it a safe place, right? The workspace that they have, is it safe? Are they able to work? And then, of course, there are other issues that you may want to consider. Public holidays, etc. So somebody is in Cameroon, somebody is in Benin, somebody is in Cote d'Ivoire, and the head office, for example, of Waxy is in Ghana. Ghana has different holidays from these countries. Does it mean that the person who's working remotely also enjoys the holidays? When we are on holiday, they are also on holiday. When there's a holiday in Benin and Cameroon, will that person enjoy those holidays too? Or will the person be expected to work because we are following the Ghana calendar? These are things that you need to have. So I believe that developing a policy answering some of these questions will then set clear remote working expectations. Then the second thing I talked about was develop remote working capacities and capabilities. This is important. Sometimes we tell people go and work remotely, but they are not ready to. They don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the computers. They have serious challenges in the places that they are with access to the internet. And internet connectivity is sometimes something you cannot do anything about, right? Have you given them some sort of data, money for data, so that they can have good internet service and be accessible. So you need to make sure that staff have the infrastructure, that you're supporting the infrastructure. Then the tools to remote work. So in WAXI, we use Microsoft 365 a lot. It helps, using tools like SharePoint, like Teams, like OneDrive. We've tried to automate many of our work processes, including leave requests, etc. And so using software that enable remote working, that also helps in terms of making sure that remote working will work for us. In the end, you want to make sure that there's still efficiency and effectiveness. You want to make sure that even though there's a remote working option, staff are still efficient, staff are still effective, but beyond that also, that staff are also in the right frame of mind, right? You have thought about their self-care, and staff are healthy, and that you have mechanisms in place to check on staff and to make sure that staff are working in the same spirit or the same environment as if they would be working from the office. So the third thing is, after building capacities and capabilities, you want to now integrate this remote working culture into your operations. Because remember, it's something relatively new, may be relatively new to your organization or your association or your group or even your movement. It may be new. So how do you then integrate this remote working culture into your organization? And the way to do this is by learning, by nurturing, by doing systematic, what I call capacity development. So for example, what are the opportunities that are created within the organization, right, to enable remote working? What are the capacities that are being built to use the various tools that facilitate remote working, right? You have to recognize champions. In every space, when something new happens, there's a new experiment, there are those who quickly get on board and become the champions. There are those who easily adapt, right? So we need to recognize these champions, but leverage on the enthusiasm and inspiration of these champions to pull other people along. Because I believe in this space, they're what I call champions, but they are also late bloomers. People who come to the party late, usually, people who may find this new arrangement not something they would naturally want to do. People who may see a lot of hindrances in the new arrangement, but you need the champions. You need the energy, the positive energy of those champions to pull everybody along. And when you do that and people start to see the benefit to them, you start to integrate this culture into your operations, right? So just to conclude very quickly, so that colleagues can have opportunity to ask questions, etc., make contributions. I believe that for us to experience resilience and adaptation in this remote working era, with all these things that I've said, the most important thing is the power of the example, right? The fact that the leadership within our organizations, within our associations, within our movements must lead from the front. Lead from the front means that they need to lead by example. They should be seen to be the ones who are promoting, who are the champions of this remote working agenda. So the actions of leadership will ensure success or failure of remote working, right? So leadership is very key, especially within this transition to remote working. And leadership should be seen to be promoting, right, this remote work if it's something that organization has agreed to. And promoting doesn't mean just talking about it or having conversations about it or sharing perspectives about remote working, but it's also about doing and supporting the remote working agenda, actually being part of the doing, being part of the process of showing that remote working can actually work. So thank you very much for this opportunity and the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you for breaking it down for us. So, and as Charles mentioned, the keywords here is resilience, adaptation, and remote working. And Charles went on to give us some examples that we can also follow. So at this point, we would like to receive questions. Unfortunately, we had to disable the chat. As you all see, we had some intruders. So we no more have the chat to put in our questions. So if you have any question, kindly raise your hand and we will be happy to call upon you to ask your question. Okay, so I can see somebody raising their hand. Suarez Sidiki. So please, sorry, you can unmute yourself and talk. I have unmuted you by mistake. Please, you can unmute yourself now. I have muted you by mistake. Sorry. If you are talking, we can't hear you. Please go ahead. Hello, Sidiki. Go ahead. You are talking, but we can't hear you. Okay, while Sidiki is trying to speak, if somebody else has a question, the person can just... I think you are having internet challenges. Hello, Sidiki. We can hardly hear you. Your line is really breaking. Okay. Do we have somebody else who have a question for us? Okay. If there is no question, then I think we can move on. So you can put, okay. Yes, I think I can see a hand up. Belinda, you can please go ahead and ask your question.
All right, thank you very much. So I wanted to ask, apart from the Microsoft 360, what other tools you are using to help with the remote working? And if you have other recommended tools that you can recommend for an organization that's also experimenting with the remote working.
Okay. Okay, I think thank you, Belinda. We can take the second question from Shu. I think Ngwa Brain. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name well. I think I can say the brain. So please, we'll come to Belinda's question. I just want us to put the questions down. Some Belinda's question can be addressed in the second presentation, but then if we can receive all the questions and the ones that Charles would like to take, we take them and we move to the second. Brain, if you can hear me, kindly unmute yourself and ask your question. If not, okay, yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. Concerning remote work, especially in this time of the COVID-19, where most organizations, most institutions engage in remote work in a bid to like curb down this COVID stuff. Yes, organizations use these tools like that was mentioned to track down work of employees. Now, my question is, how efficient or how effective are these tools? Because we know that, I know there are many tools actually, but I don't think employees' progress can be fully tracked, or employees like during the work, like during work hours. Yes, I know employees can sign in into these tools, but actually not working. That's what we call presenteeism. Yes, they can sign into these tools, but not actually working. And then maybe when let me say it's 1 hour remaining to like a close of time or the day, and just come in and then do something and then just forward. They have worked for the day, is marked. But how effective is this tool? Because to me, I see these tools, they are not that effective.
Okay, thank you, Brain. Yes, Sidiki, are you back? We can still not hear you. Thank you, Brain. I think Charles, would you like to go?
Yeah. Thank you, Stella. I think that's a very good question by Brain. Excellent question. How effective, what mechanisms can you put in place to ensure that staff are still productive even though they are working remotely? I think one of the things that we need to consider is to give people deliverables, and not seek to a large extent to micromanage. And so they have a specific deliverable or task that they need to do either daily or the week. And then you put in mechanisms to have what I call periodic check-ins, just to ask, how are things going? Are you having any difficulties? Do you need support to complete the task, etc.? So you need to be very deliberate about clarity of tasks for a specific time frame. Also, you need to be very deliberate about the periodic check-ins. The idea is not to micromanage, but the idea is to still continue to build cohesion and continue to build a team spirit, even though you are not in the same location. It is not as easy as I'm saying. It is challenging. It is challenging, but it's important that as the leaders, those who are the supervisors, there's more responsibility on your shoulders to ensure that you create that environment and space for your colleagues to want to still work and work productively, even though they are working remotely. I hope I've been able to answer your question.
Thank you very much, sir. It has been answered.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you, Bryn. I think the first question, which is on the tools, apart from Microsoft 365, what other tools can be used for remote work? I think that will be answered during the second phase of this session. So do we have other questions? Brain, I can still see your hand up. I think it's the old hand. Please, do we have any other question? Okay, so if we don't have any other question, I will leave the floor to my colleague, my colleague Doris, who is the co-moderator for the session, to introduce to us the second presenter of the day. Doris, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Stella. Thank you, Mr. Van Dijk, for the insightful presentation. So our second speaker happens to be an operation expert and very excited about his show that offers him the opportunity to use his knowledge in operation management to help provide access to safe drinking water to rural communities in northern Ghana. One amazing thing about this speaker is that he moved from the profit sector to the non-profit sector. He's in the person of Mr. Theo Watson, the Director of Ghana Operations for Saha Global, a non-profit organization based in northern Ghana that seeks to provide access to safe drinking water to rural communities. If we have Mr. Watson here. Thank you.
Hi, Doris. Yes,
hi.
I'm here.
Okay, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you, Doris, and thank you, everyone. I like to say that was a really good presentation by Mr. Charles. There are a lot of things he said, really resonated with me. And so as I share our experience, and when I say I'm talking about Saha and how we have adapted, in these times, I hope that you will begin to find the linkages between what I'm saying and what, Mr. Kojo Van Dijk was also saying. So I will share my screen and okay. So like Doris said, I'm the Director of Operations for Saha Global, which is a non-profit working in the northern region of Ghana. And basically what we do is we work in remote communities, set up chlorinating businesses that provide clean water to people in the villages. So when COVID hit, of course, our work became even more important. We were actually part of the organizations that delivered on the president's free water mandates. Executing such a task in a period such as COVID with a lot of restrictions was easy. But I think that for us as an organization, because of some of the structures we had in place and some of the tools we had in place, we were able to do that, a lot more effectively. So how did we adapt our operations? So what you see here are all logos of, some of the tools that we use. Now, this is majority of the things we use. Of course, there are still some very little ones that I don't have on here. So Asana, maybe I can walk you through one by one, but Asana is the project management tool that allows you to collaborate on, projects. I know somebody was talking about, how do you know what you're calling Zoom? I think we all know Zoom. It's a data management tool. So a big part of our work water in communities is that we go to the communities often from time to time to collect information on what is working. So for instance, we go to collect information on, the water that has been treated. Is it clean enough? Are there still bacteria in it? Are people buying water? Are the women entrepreneurs or the waterpreneurs, as we call them, are they treating water? So this is all information we collect, and we use this powerful tool called M-Water to collect that. Of course, we also use G Suite, which includes Gmail, Calendar, Google Docs, Google Drive, all of that. Then we will use, I think Ghana's favorite, WhatsApp, as well as EcoBank's online portal. So for us as an organization, these tools have come together to help us make us really strong in the face of adversity. When COVID hit, for instance, we realized that we could not, have in-person meetings. And so all in-person meetings transitioned to Zoom, okay? Then we realized that, okay, once we have those meetings, we need to document them somewhere because people are going to walk away from those meetings with specific tasks to go and complete. This is where Asana comes in handy. So you realize that we don't just use Zoom, but we are using Zoom hand in hand with Asana, right? So for instance, we come for a meeting, we say, deliver X amount of poly tanks to a certain village. It is documented in Asana. It is assigned to someone and due dates are given. You just to the Asana project. That we were able to hold, members of the team accountable. If they have questions, they can also put it in Asana, and then we can all collaborate. Asana is a more helpful tool, when you are collaborating on a specific project, or maybe not a specific project, when you are collaborating on projects, it's a more helpful tool than WhatsApp, because WhatsApp details can get lost in there. But WhatsApp is really good for announcements, we found, communication. And so, for instance, we use WhatsApp as a platform to share information about, COVID, the what to do's, the myths of COVID. That was a really helpful platform for us, okay? A big part of our operations were also affected was the administrative part. When COVID hit, we all went home. That meant that we could not process payments the regular way we used to, which is someone prepares the requisition, somebody writes on paper, it comes to me for me to sign, goes to finance, we call the vendor to pick up the check. We realized that, look, there are too many contact points. With COVID, how do we make sure that we eliminate these contact points, but still at the end of the day, make sure that we conduct business so that we can deliver on our mandate of delivering clean water to communities. So this is where the EcoBank online portal comes in, right? But bear in mind that all these things it's tied to a process. None of these things are standalones, okay? So you have, somebody can put a request in Asana, which, to buy maybe motorbikes. That means that the admin officer would have to see it, would have to prepare a requisition, maybe using the Google Forms, then make sure it is forwarded to the appropriate supervisor. Supervisor will minute on it, send to finance via email. Finance gets it, issues, the order in EcoBank, the EcoBank portal, and then quickly we can dispatch the cash electronically to the vendor. We can even do Momo, where necessary. And so we found that these tools really, really helped us. For our field guys, you've asked, how did this help our field guys? So Calendar, for instance, was one of the really useful tools for our field guys, where before COVID, what would happen is before they go out to the field, the day before, they'll meet with their supervisors. Supervisor will tell them, you're going to village X. When you get to village X, do A, B, C, D. With calendars, what would happen was we just put it in the calendar, the name of the village you are supposed to visit. And then in the notes section, we'll put, when you get to the village, we put exactly what we want them to do, right? So when you get into the village, do activity 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? If we want, we can also put that same information in Asana, just so that when the field staff gets, so what's going to happen is that, the field staff is going to get an alert on their phone, right? Because the supervisor will set the notifications, maybe a day before, 1 hour before they go to the field. They'll check their phones, they see exactly what they need to do in the field. When they get to the field, they do what they have to do. When they come back, they fill out their M-Water survey, okay, which will collect data, from the field. And then when the supervisor sees it, the supervisor now notices items from the data they had collected using M-Water, which needs further actions. And the supervisor will now put that in Asana. So you see, it's not a standalone thing, like I'm just using calendar. What we did was we had to identify all these tools and then find a way or design a process. We actually, had to design a process, that helps the flow of communication to ensure that, all of these things are working. Because at every point in time, so many things are happening in the organization. And so for us, I think that one of the ways that we really adopted was to find a way to make really good use of these tools that we had available to us, to be able to enhance communication and also deliver on our output. So mine is going to be a very short presentation. I think that my experience, basically I've shared my experience, and I just want to talk about the lessons in the next 5 minutes. The lessons we learned during this process is that you have to be flexible, okay? So the leaders of the organization have to be flexible. Some of your staff are new to some of these tools. You have to take the pain to either walk them through. Thankfully, most of these tools have tutorials. So either you share with them so that, they complete the tutorials and then they get to use it. You have to be flexible, but you also have to make sure that, if you decide on what tools you are going to use, you have to be committed in using those tools. So that's a very key thing. And also have in the back of your mind that things can go wrong. Okay, so in the initial stages, when things go wrong, don't beat yourself too hard. Just know that it's a learning phase, it's a process, but it's important for you, even though it's a learning phase, to set some KPIs or performance indicators so that from time to time you can come back and look at, okay, how well are we performing on the adoption on some of these tools? What are some of the pain points? How can we rethink some of the processes connected to some of these tools, and how can we improve it in the end? Okay, so please be flexible. The second thing I'll say is build a process. Build a process. Like I have said, it's these things are not standalones. Okay, so EcoBank portal working is going to work because somebody will put something in Asana which has to be seen by the finance person so that he can initiate the transactions in the EcoBank portal, or the supervisor who is sitting in the office using all these tools will communicate with the field staff who is at home but is scheduled to go to the field tomorrow by using calendar. And the field staff, when he goes to the field, will now use M-Water to collect information, which will be later forwarded to the field staff who will then analyze. So it's a cycle, okay, and it's a process. And I think what is really going to help you in building this process is sitting down with a team. You can do that online and trying to understand how it works for you. It can work differently for every organization. There's no one size fits all approach here. It's up to you to tailor it to fit the needs of your specific organization. Okay. And then the last thing I would say is make tools available. You cannot use, I think, what really helped us is the fact that we had the tools. So in tools, I'm talking about mobile phones. Okay. All of our staff, we provide mobile phones. We provide data, we provide call credits. Yes, making tools available comes at a cost, but you have to weigh, the cost of having these tools versus the cost of not having these tools. If I don't provide, or if we don't provide staff with mobile phones and we expect them to use their own mobile phones, how do you really hold someone accountable for that, right? If we don't provide data and they give, and excuses come, we don't have data, yada, 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 what can you do? So as much as possible, if you provide these tools, then one, you equip them to be able to do the work, but two, you also eliminate to a very great extent the kind of excuses you are going to be getting, okay? So make the tools available. You can focus on reducing costs somewhere. So for instance, in our case, because we're not going to the field as much, we were able to reduce our fuel costs, okay? Because very less travel. So we reduced our fuel costs and we channel those resources into increasing the data allowances for all staff. And so I think we had 2 gig for people, but we increased it to about 8 gig because we're going to be on a lot of Zoom calls. We're going to be using Emota a lot more. We're going to be using Asana a lot more. So that's my last point. Make tools available. This is a really short presentation by Theo, and I hope you find it helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Theo. That was a good one. You spoke, the tools that you spoke about was G Suite. I think now it is Google Workspace, Asana, Zoom, WhatsApp, and also the EcoBank platform, right? So I think to Belinda, you asked what other tools can be used for remote work when Charles mentioned Microsoft 365. I think Theo has added some other tools. Please, if you are not satisfied, you can please let us know and we can add more tools if possible. Do we have, at this point, we can receive questions? Okay, we can receive questions from participants. The question can go to both Charles, our first presenter, and also Theo. So Siddiqui, I can see your hand up. You can go ahead.
This time, I hope that you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please. Okay, it's very hard to hear you now. Your line is breaking big time. We can't hear you, Siddiqui. Sorry about that. We can't hear you, Siddiqui.
Salute. My question, Siddiqui. Yeah, like remote work. Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So Charles, thank you for your wonderful presentation. My question is that at this remote era, what advice do we have to give to someone who will work remotely, like my case in Guinea with WACC, for more than a year? I mean, 1 year, 2 years, because sometimes as the advantages and disadvantages that you highlighted, my case, sometimes we have a lot of time working at home, but if one is not careful, one can easily waste a time, because you always expect that you do have a time, and sometimes that is not the case. So if you do have 1 year, 2 years, or let me say a permanent contract, what are the advice that you have for someone to to be productive anytime? Yeah, that's the question.
Okay. I think Siddiqui, Charles has taken note of your question. We'll take Ayodeji and then Charles can, the second question, and Charles can go on. Yes, please. Ayo, you are,
yeah.
The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. My question is directed at you. Like, thank you for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. So my question really is that I'm trying to gauge adaptation on the part of the company, on the part of the organization, not only on the part of the employees. And I'm concerned about connectivity issues. How will you say your staff members, coped with internet connectivity, and as an organization, how will you also gauge productivity? So compared to when your staff members were working physically and when you had all the infrastructure for working online, would you say that it was more adaptable, or should I say beneficial for the business when you were working online?
Okay, thank you. I think Charles can take his question, and then Theo, and then we can take the rest of the hand up.
Thank you, Stella. Thank you, Siddiqui, for that question. Very good question. Yes, there are, of course, clear disadvantages. I did mention some of those, but I think it's also about when you are in that situation, like I mentioned, clarity about expectations on both sides. So expectations in terms of what you are to deliver within a specific period of time, and also expectations in terms of the kind of support that you will need from your supervisor. I think when it comes to remote working, much more conversation is needed. So for example, some of the challenges that you've shared, these are some of the conversations that I believe you should share with your supervisor and say, look, I'm having these challenges. These are in my space, there's internet connectivity challenges. Maybe my environment is not too suitable at home right now. And I believe it's about flexibility. Theo mentioned that flexibility. The supervisor must be aware of the challenges and then can then respond and then help, or the organization can help in terms of being more flexible and responsive to your specific needs. So I think communication is key, is extremely key. Feedback, you need to give feedback to your supervisor, to the organization. Because in the end, you want to also make sure that you deliver on your task, but you also want to make sure that you enjoy the work that you are doing, and you also want to make sure that the organization, you're also able to help to contribute to the organization's operations or its objective. So I believe this is the way to go. So it's all about flexibility and communication.
Okay.
Perfect.
Siddiqui,
Thank you so
okay?
much. Very okay.
Right.
Very okay. Thank you so much.
Great.
Sure.
Theo, please, you can answer Ayo's question.
Yes, Ayo, I think if I heard you right, there were two main issues you pointed out, which is connectivity issues and something to do with productivity. And so I think with the connectivity issues, I agree with you. It's a really, it's a pain point. It's also frustrating, sometimes, especially for management. But I think what we did that really helped was, as an organization, we made sure to provide, really good internet in the office. Okay, so that for some of our colleagues who were having challenges connecting to the internet at home, then an option for them was, okay, you can come to the office and use the internet in the office. And I think if you listen to Charles' presentation earlier, I was like, that means that management, once you get a sense of that, you need to ration the number of people that come into the office. So there's a bit of that might need to happen. If you get a sense of the number of people that need to be working in the office, you might have to come up with a plan for where they sit, what times they come in. But I think you might have to, that's one option that, we took, and it worked out really well. Also, what we did was, okay, if you cannot come to the office, is there a spot in your area that has really good internet connections? Sometimes we seem to know some of these things, right, by talking to our friends. This area has really good internet connection. On top of this mountain, the connection is really good. You can encourage staff to, use those places at specific time, especially when maybe you have meetings with them or you need some information. They can go there, make sure they can sync the data you need, and it will be really helpful. Okay. Now to talk about productivity, it's true that productivity. How do you make sure people are working? Because people say they are working from home, but you don't really know if they are working from home. And the thing is, first of all, you have to trust your staff, right? So that's a big thing. And number two, you have to also provide the tools that make it easy for you as a manager to hold people accountable, right? So for us, Asana works perfectly. When I assigned, let's say, my finance director a task, I put it in there. He is tagged to the task. There's a due date for the task, okay? And then if there are notes in the task, they are in there. So he knows, and it is communicated to him. So he gets an email when I create a task in that project management tool, Asana. He gets an email and he's supposed to respond. At the end of, let's say, a week, what we do is we can go back and look at, okay, this week, what did you achieve? Did you hit your outputs? You were supposed to deliver on this task. Did you do it? If you didn't do it, why? Can you explain? So yes, providing the tools will help. Productivity, we have to hold staff accountable. I think that will be my response to that.
I'm sorry if I could just come in. Yeah, so I understand the place for Asana, but my question is like comparing working physically and working online. Would you say your staff members were more productive when they were working physically or working online, or would you say they were equally productive?
I would say it's hard to tell because there are definitely pros and cons to both, right? But now that we've gone through, a period of COVID, I would say that I have been really impressed with, the rate at which our staff changed, or adapted to change and adopted technology. So we have seen that people have been productive, especially when it comes to delivering outputs. What we've done is we've not really stressed ourselves about the process, like how things are getting done. We've been more focused on, have you done it? So I don't know, my answer to your question will not be a black and white yes or no, but I think that there's been pros and cons. People have adapted. We have, as it is now, I am working from home now, if you can see, it's working out really well for me. Other people in the organization, we've built the processes over time, we fine-tuned them, so it's working. So, but of course, there are also pros to having people come in face to face. So I think, yeah, I will not be able to give you a yes or no black and white, but if you make the environment conducive, you can get the benefits of both.
Hello.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Theo. We can see other hands up. I'll call all of them. But Theo, when you were talking, I also have some kind of follow-up question to Ayo's question to you. Did you have to give your staff some training to use those tools? Were you using some of these tools before the pandemic, or it was because of the pandemic you acquired them? And if yes, did you have to give them some training, or they were able to just adapt and start using them?
Right. So for most of the tools, we started using them before the pandemic. But yes, in terms of training, you always have to make sure to train them, which includes, maybe sometimes coming up with a standard of procedure, or a process document, which you can train staff on, because you want to make sure that, everybody understands that when it comes to operating these are the steps we follow. And using technology, you also, like for instance, I mentioned use of WhatsApp. WhatsApp is very interesting. So you need to train your staff to be able to know what information can be forwarded, what information stays in-house, what is confidential. So yes, a lot of training has to go in as well. You have to develop the policies, you have to develop the training documents, and you have to, bring them together, talk to them, take questions, answer, and build on that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I think we will take it in this order. Rashad Evarist, Elijah Balu. So Rashad, if you can hear me, kindly unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, good evening, and nice presentation by both Charles and Theo. My question is much more directed to Theo. It seems like your organization is involved in a lot of operations, especially in Northern Ghana, and I'm quite interested in knowing if, of course, how are rural or NGOs that are based in rural areas adapting to this new way of working? How is it going? Because I'm noticing that most of the tools we use for the work are online. Of course, you need internet, you need those softwares, and you need to know how to use them. So how are these NGOs in local or in rural areas adapting to this new way of working? And the point that you mentioned about WhatsApp is very, very, very interesting, especially about information that can be forwarded or not. A nice one. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashad. Evarist, please go ahead. Evaris, are you there? Can you hear me? Evaris, si vous avez une question, vous pouvez... Allez-y, s'il vous plaît.
Good afternoon for all people for Nigeria and Ghana and Togo. But my question is this: this meeting no have a presentation in French or so in English, because we understand all who you speak, but don't understand all argumentation who you speak.
Okay, thank you, Evaris. I think I got your point.
Nous voulons bien que la présentation, que ça se présente aussi en français pour que tout le monde puisse avoir la plénitude de réagir décemment avec les arguments. Merci.
D'accord. Oui. Merci, Monsieur Akoto. Atoko, c'est juste, cette session est uniquement en anglais. Nous allons organiser un autre webinaire qui sera en français pour les francophones. Mais cette fois-ci, c'est uniquement en anglais.
OK, merci.
Je vous en prie. Elijah, please, you can go ahead to ask your question. Elijah, are you there? If you are talking, we can't hear you.
I've been there. Yeah. Oh, I'm the director here. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hello?
Yes, please go ahead with your question.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the director of and I've been trying to validate my company with you, but unfortunately, the registration we have.
Elijah, please, I think, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, but your line
Hello?
was breaking. Yes, please. Can we?
Yeah, sorry
yes,
for that.
okay.
I'm
No
trying
problem.
to cut some time. Hello? Hello? Okay.
Go ahead. Yes. Okay, I think.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, please. Can
you hear me now, please?
Yes, I can hear you. But your line was really breaking. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Please, what I'm trying to say is that my registration certificate I have, because of the financials.
Please, you're on mute. If you are talking, we can't hear you. Okay, I think whilst we are waiting for Elijah to unmute himself, Danjuma can go ahead.
Good afternoon, Stella.
Hello?
And good afternoon, everyone.
Hello. Go to his office. Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Please. Yes. Hello.
Thank you. Now, what I'm saying is that I try to to validate my account with your TechnoSoft, and you requested for my certificate of registration. But fortunately, we registered with business name because of the processing and the money that they.
Elijah, I can't hear you, but let's take the questions that are directly, are directed to the presentation that we just had. And then if there is something else, if we are left with about 5 minutes to close, and we can take any other question that is related to TechSoup. We'll have time to talk about TechSoup, and then all the questions that have to do with TechSoup can come in. Thank you. Danjuma, please, you can just take the floor and ask your question.
Okay, thank you so much, Stella, and good day to all of us here in West Africa in this meeting. I am from an organization that is working keenly around governance, and yeah, so the remote working system, I think, has been so much whether this is improving.
Hello, Danjuma, you are muted now. I don't know why. So you can please unmute yourself and continue. Hello, Danjuma, if you can hear me, we are not hearing you because you are muted.
Okay, I have muted and unmuted again. I hope I'm audible now.
Audible.
Okay, thank you. So working remotely, we have seen the capacity of individual team members really increasing. The level of dependency on another that we usually would have within the working space really had reduced. People are able to take initiative, do work processes that ordinarily they would have dependent else to take up for them. So I think it is working. However, it requires patience. Like I've heard everyone here mention, it requires patience. It requires understanding. Your expectations must be very realistic, and as we continue to do that, we find that we can actually get to do so much more. Sometimes the issue of technology, yes, is a challenge, but just keeping your mindset around the challenges does not even help you achieve what you want to do. For instance, we have done strategy sessions on the budget on WhatsApp. Everybody, over 100 people on one WhatsApp room, and that lessons, everything is being discussed. And you're using audio files, sharing audio files, speaking to the phone, and sharing all of that thought, answering questions, and really carrying that out. We have monitoring procurement in various locations, rural communities, and every time they've got to do this, we have this means of just calling in, checking. When you have these data challenges, there is a backup support that stays and ensure that everything you need to actually get your job done is done. And so, yeah, COVID-19 just created an opportunity, I think, for more capacity building amongst teams. That is what I wanted to make a contribution around.
Okay, thank you, Danjuma. So Danjuma wasn't a question, but an addition. And he ended by saying that we need more capacity building, which is, I think it's very true. I think we can take, if Phil can just answer Rasha's question, and then we can move on with so that we don't have too much time elapsing.
Okay, sure. Yes. I think Rashad's question had to do with, do I know any, NGOs in the space that are using, some of the technologies that we are using?
I'll say that, they are adapting.
How they're adapting, yes. I'll say that, yes, my colleagues in other NGOs who I've spoken to have told me that they are now using some of these tools. Some are using mWater, some are using Kobo Toolbox. But the key feature of the tool is that we are all now using tools where when we go to the field, we can collect information. Even in the absence of internet, we can still collect the information. Okay, so your tool should be able to collect information without internet. But when you connect to the internet, it should sync. So it doesn't really stop us from working. We're still able to work. When we get back to where internet works, we're able to sync the data, and it goes across the organization. Yeah.
Okay. Rashad, are you satisfied? with their response?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Thank you, Theo. Thank you,
Rashad,
Rashad.
let me also add that another key feature of these tools is that most of them that I know are GPS tagged. Okay, so that because I think one of your concerns.
Hello, Theo. I think we lost you. We lost him. So Balo, you can go ahead with your question. Yes, Balo.
Yes, thank you very much, Stella. Thank you very much, Charles and Theo, for your different presentation. So I want to believe that today the aspect of working remotely has come to stay with due to COVID-19. So people have to get adapted to it, and it is actually indispensable. So my question is addressed to Charles. I actually followed his presentation very keenly. So my first question is to know what are some of the techniques that we can use, right, to attain expected deliverables while working remotely. And the second question I have to ask here is, can we consider remote working as a skill set for jobs, for job to get a job, like you working remotely, can it be considered today as a skill set when looking for a job? So that is it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Balo. Jedli, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you very much. My own is not really a question, but an appreciation to the Watson family. We have been part of this process since 2020 up to present, and I want to register our thanks and appreciation for all the capacity building that Technos had done for us, and also the materials donation. I thank you so much. We received the materials that was promised the other time. Thank you very much. We highly appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jedli. They are very well received. Thank you. Charles, please, you can go ahead and answer Balo's question. The two questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Stella. Thank you, Balo, for those questions. So in terms of techniques, Theo said something very, very important. It's about having access to the tools and then also learning how to use those tools. And what I've seen, I could use a basic example of how things work really well if you know how to use the tool. So there's a basic tool on Microsoft 365 called the SharePoint. And one of the reasons I love SharePoint is that if you are writing a report or you're developing a concept or you're writing a proposal, you can do it in real time with colleagues. So it's out there and you can see what everybody's input is. So you're not in the same location, but it still has the feel of working together. And so that is how, in terms of using a tool, it's helpful in terms of actually delivering. Then there's of course the meetings. You know, we have a lot of meetings. So now that we have the calendar, it helps in terms of being clear in your mind. When meetings are scheduled, you go to your calendar, you see where your meetings are, you can then plan your day and make sure that you have a productive day. Then Theo talks about the data collection tools. So there are certain tools that you use if you are collecting data for advocacy or you're collecting data to provide a certain service. If you know how to use the data collection tool, and some of these tools, you don't even need the internet, you find that working remotely is not very, very difficult. But it's also another thing is that it's also about constant interaction and communication. WhatsApp becomes very, very valuable, So you could actually call colleagues very easily with WhatsApp calls. You can have a 3-way call, 4-way call, 5-way call, very valuable tool. You can use Teams to have quick conversations with colleagues. You can ask them, they don't have to, the camera can be there, you can see their faces. And all these things help in terms of delivering on the work. So for me, it's about taking these tools and making it deliver for you, and making sure that the work you're doing is still very interactive and team-based. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, Charles, I think his second question, if a remote work can be now
a skill set
for job.
Yeah. No, it's a very interesting question. I'll say to a large extent, it's a way of working. So yes, to a large extent, I would say it's a skill set, because you have to learn how to work remotely. However, in terms of if I'm putting it and if I'm valuing it in terms of, it's an essential skill set, right? It's something that everyone now needs, especially within our space. So it's not an optional. So back in the days, it was nice to have that skill. It was nice if you could work remotely. People thought, oh, that's nice. But now it's a must-have skill. And so that's how I think we should look at it.
Thank you, Charles. I think, Balu, I'm sure you are satisfied. To ask Charles, to what extent would you say that non-profit organizations have learned to redefine their operation to be more responsive to such crisis, the crisis like Corona, tomorrow we don't know what's next. To what extent do you think they are prepared to respond to such crisis?
It's a tough question, because I think it depends on the organization, where they are located, the culture, the resources, etc. But generally, I think we were not prepared, just like every other sector. We don't need to beat ourselves up too much. But I think what this crisis has done is has waken us up to realize that we need to do more strategic thinking. We need to be more innovative. We need to start embracing technology. I mean, there was a lot about talk about technology even before COVID, but I think people are now beginning to understand the importance of leveraging on technology, especially within the sector. I believe before the next crisis, because I don't think this will be the only crisis, I think that we will be much more prepared, taking the lessons from here and taking the actions that we are taking right now.
Thank you, Charles. Ayo, I can see your hand up.
Okay, just as a follow-up question, I would just like to draw a bit from your wealth of knowledge, Charles. So you were talking about remote working being like a necessary skill. So what do you think is, should I say, is the hope for future for young people, like the hope for the future for young people? Because I've also heard of many recruiters, especially international recruiters, saying that they don't like to employ young Africans if they are going to work remotely because of security, because of connectivity issues, and also maybe because of insecurity, and so employees may be unstable. So if we are talking about the digital times, we are talking about times where we are not sure about the next pandemic or epidemic, do you think that Africans or people living in Africa have a chance to compete with people living in the global north?
Stella, should I go ahead?
Yes, Charles, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Ayo, for the question. It's a very, very deep question and relevant question. So I think there's a challenge for all of us now. I think we begin to realize that internet access and connectivity has to become much better than it is in our region, in our countries, everywhere. So we need to push so that it becomes a right. So for now, for many of us, these issues were not our issues. And now I dare say it's become our issues, and we need to coordinate around efforts in pushing our governments, to really put in place the right infrastructure for us to get good connectivity. Because you are right about one thing. Connectivity is extremely important now it determines a lot. It determines in terms of competitiveness, you're right, in the job market, etc. And it becomes quite frustrating when internet connectivity does not allow you to work. but it's also about at our local levels, because I believe community changes come at the local level and come at the national level. We know our internet service providers, we have their addresses, we have their names. And I think it's about time we start to engage with these companies so that, we bring some of these issues to the fore, they improve their services, we find ways of these companies supporting the work that we do and giving us the kind of access to data, and access to good internet that we need. So it's about us being more strategic now, and engaging some of these service providers. There's no other way out because we don't have control over this infrastructure. But there's one thing we do have control about is the advocacy and the tools to engage. And we have the numbers as a sector. So there needs to be some sort of leadership at all levels that comes together to engage in these issues. That's the only way the infrastructure will become better.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to add on to Charles's presentation, if you don't mind.
Sure, please go ahead.
Yeah, because I think I also heard Ayo, talking about, so like if you're an employee, you were concerned, about, can you land a job with this big organization somewhere in the US? I think all of the things Charles has said is really true. There are lots of things that need to be done. Maybe on a personal level too, what you can do is you have to come up with systems and processes that would work for you. So for instance, if you are working with an organization, if they don't propose the use of certain tools, you can propose the use of those tools to make your work really transparent so that they know at each point in time exactly what you are working on. Okay. You can make sure that they, like for instance, even calendar, right? Sharing your calendar with them. So you have to make a case for yourself, because I believe strongly that we're capable in the face of all these challenges. We're really capable. We just have to find new ways of working. And I think once we do that, it will work.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. Please, do we have other questions? Okay, so if we don't have any other question, if participants don't have other questions, I think I'll ask a question. Charles can go ahead, or Theo. So after that, we also talk about, I can see that there are participants or people in the webinar who would like to hear about TechSoup, and also some of these products or tools that we are talking about are already also on TechSoup. So we will have about 10 minutes to, give us a little bit of information about TechSoup. And if you have follow-up questions, then we can receive that. So my question is, what are some of the steps taken at an organizational level, so it's going for both Charles and Theo, as I mentioned, that have come to stay and will define how organizations work going forward? Charles, you can go, or Theo can also take it.
Yeah, I'll try and answer this by saying we had a very we had a very physical face-to-face world. Virtual world was a couple of people, who just liked experimenting those days. But all of a sudden we were hit by the virtual world. So now I believe in terms of ways of working, we need to blend it. Now there's a blended approach to ways of working. So as organization moving forward, we have to learn to work. Yes, we already know how to work face-to-face traditionally, but now we have to learn to work also virtually and then blend both to make it work for us. And I believe that has come to stay. Even if all of a sudden the pandemic disappears today, I believe that will come to stay for the long term. And so the issue of ability to utilize technology, right, to drive the work that we are doing is something that I believe has come to stay. Like I said before, back in the days when people like Theo and those were using technology, we admired them. We thought, oh, these guys, we always used to think that they were from the STEM group. They were a special set of people. You understand? Now, what it has become is that apparently technology is not for a special set of people, but in terms, it's for all of us, because it's going to determine our survival, but beyond that, it's going to determine whether we will thrive. And so we need to embrace that technology. So I believe in terms of mindset shift, that has come to stay. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, Charles.
Just to add on to what Charles has said, yes, it has come to stay. How can organizations adopt? I think, if you look at my presentation, it will be too much for one organization to try to do all of these things at once. So my advice is that, you can have it in stages or create phases. Maybe now the first thing can be, okay, we put all meetings on calendars so that, we're no longer going to remind people by word of mouth that we have meetings. Okay, it's going to be on the calendars. Everybody is going to be trained how to use their calendar. So you can take it by phases, and that will also really help. Then it's going to everybody. It also fosters transparency, or everybody in the organization should be willing to be transparent. In this era, for things to work, you cannot really work in silos, so whatever I'm doing with the finance team has to be in a space that's easily accessible by someone in the customer care team or administrative team. So transparency is also a big thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we have some questions in the chat box. My colleague Doris will take that. My colleague Doris will take that, the question in the chat box. So that's
okay, Stella. Hello, Stella. Please, can you hear me? So someone is asking from Samira. He's asking whether there are softwares. Okay, so someone asks whether there are software that link project activities to donors. So Theo, you can take that for us.
So for us, we are not, I'm sure there definitely are softwares. There are a lot of softwares, we don't use any software at the moment. Basically, it's in Word documents and we share with our donors. But there are definitely a lot of softwares. What he can also do is to just ask the donor if they know, if they have a software they would prefer him to use. Usually, if the donors have that, they can share with you. Otherwise, you can also just, do a quick Google search on softwares to communicate program activities. But there are definitely a lot out there.
Okay. Another participant is talking about a software called Sprinkles, which is very expensive for NGOs. So I think with that, we will talk about it later on when we are talking about the products we have.
Okay. I think, Doris, is that all the question in the box?
Yes,
the chat?
far.
Okay. I think I'll at this point, once again, thank you, Charles and Theo. We are almost getting to the end. I'll give the opportunity to Kwame Asante to talk a bit about TechSoup, and even I think he can address Samira's question. I think it was the question that Doris just read about the communicating our projects to donors. If there is a software like that, I think you can also touch on that if necessary or possible. Kwame, if you are there, you can please quickly, 10 minutes to talk about TechSoup. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stella. And thank you to Charles and Theo for those brilliant presentations. Yes, so I'm just quickly going to show us all, being in the nonprofit space and considering the fact that the nonprofit sector is really a sector that is not profit making. So most of the time we struggle on getting funds to get access to the technology we need to work. So how do we address this as nonprofits? So I'm going to introduce to us TechSoup, which is a social enterprise and a nonprofit organization in itself that is global and seeks to provide access to the technology we need as nonprofits to be able to perform in this remote working era. As I mentioned, TechSoup is a global organization and it has regional bodies that manages in the various regions across the world. And in West Africa, WAXI happens to be the organization that manages the TechSoup platform in the region. So we ourselves have gone through some challenges in acquiring technology until we got to the point we are now that we are able to use technology effectively. And some of the challenges we've gone through are what is currently shown on my screen, but the core of it is the funding aspect. And then also there are some other challenges with regards to the needed skills and then availability of training. I believe we've seen the need for us to go through acquire technology and adapt to it in this remote working era. And so I will just show us how we can get on board TechSoup and begin benefiting from it. Theo mentioned the use of Zoom, Asana, and then Office 365 are some of the tools that we can use. And all of these applications and tools are available on the TechSoup platform, but you can acquire it at very less prices, or in some cases at no cost at all when you come to TechSoup. So we'll take you through some training and discuss with you the particular solution that will work for you. And then we can help you decide or make a decision on which ones that you will get. Now, when I talk about having the products at very little or no cost at all, this is what I mean. Usually when we talk about discounted products, then we are looking at something like 50% of the market price. But what we provide at TechSoup is that we just take an administrative fee that is supposed to sustain the program. And by that, I mean that we constantly reach out to organizations. We do a lot of marketing, we do a lot of training. And so to be able to make this program, this donation program sustainable, we charge an administrative fee from organizations when they come to us for this software. So as we can see here, Microsoft Office, which on the market is $439, can be acquired by nonprofits for $39 when you come to TechSoup, saving you $400 if you were to get it on the market. This is Bitdefender Antivirus, which is very, very essential for every organization that has dealings online and even in our offices. You can see the market price is $79, and then when you come to TechSoup, it's only $17. So these are just a handful of applications that we show. And then when you come to Office 365, which is a very useful and collaborative tool that can help us work effectively in the cloud and also remotely. We have various types of license. Some are absolutely free, and some goes for as low as $6. Some goes for as low as $3 per user per month. So once you are able to register and we validate you, we will take you through the various options and the various products we have in our catalog, and then we can get you started right away. Organizations that qualify for this are all nonprofit organizations, churches, mosques, libraries, community-based organizations, associations, and the likes. Now, to be able to begin benefiting from this product, all you need to do is to visit our portal, which is westafrica.techsoup.global, and then you can sign up and register. So after this presentation, we are going to send an email to us all, and then we can all follow up from there. But before I go, let me quickly show us how the platform is. When you go there, this is what you would see. You select your country. So in this case, I'm going to select Ghana. And then once I come here, I can click on this sign up button at the right here. And then it will let me enter the details that I want you to sign up. This is the first point. So once you are able to do this, then you are well on the way to get your organization started in benefiting from us. if you check the catalog, there are several products. You can see there are 279 products that you can benefit from. So we encourage us all that if you are not on the platform already, you should try and endeavor and get on the platform. We also provide other services, not only products. We can also provide advisory services to you. We can also provide various levels of trainings to you. And we actually also have an online course platform that you can also equip yourself and your team in various courses to acquire the necessary skills to be able to thrive in this remote working era. So thank you very much. We'll put our contacts out there at the end of this so that you can always reach out to us. Our doors are always open. Thank you very much, Stella. You can take over now.
Thank you so much, Kwame. That was a brief and swift presentation. Before I start receiving your questions, if any, I would like to hammer on the fact that Charles mentioned that we have, they or Waxy have been using Microsoft 365 or Office 365 during their remote working. And he mentioned SharePoint and some other application. And Theo also mentioned Google for G Suite, which is now Google Workspace. He mentioned Zoom. So when Kwame was presenting, he also showed us those applications. So I want to assure us that TechSoup has those applications, those software available at a non-profit price. So you wouldn't need to go to the market to get those important software that are being used for the remote work, but you can get it at TechSoup. And as Kwame mentioned, it's very easy. You just need to get registered, be validated, and you can explore all the licenses we have in our catalog. So I've shared with us the website, our email, and I'll also share the link to our catalog so that you can have an idea of the things you can benefit from. I can see Samira's hand up. Please, you can go ahead. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Hi, Kwame. Hi, Stella. It's been a long compliments of the season. The reason why I raised my hand, I wanted to find out if you have an app called maybe something at the side you can look at. It's www.sprinkler.com. I joined a webinar where they talked about it. That's what the software does. Actually, it makes life easy for nonprofits in terms of reporting activities to donors such that you don't have to think about how you're going to send reports. It automatically does that for you. If you put it on one particular content on one app, it goes round to the remaining apps, like reporting apps that you have. So when I asked on how much it costs, it's actually very, very huge, a huge amount. So I was now thinking if there's a similar software like that, that is for NGOs, that it's affordable and it makes life easy in terms of reporting activities such that it doesn't overwhelm you. You need to report on so many channels. And this app does it for you instantly just by clicking one button and it's done. So I don't know if there's something like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Samira. That is well noted. I guess you are asking if you have something like that on TechSoup. Currently, yes. I would say no, and I would say yes, but not a strong yes. Because when you are using Office 365, you have a lot of applications, and some application like I think Planner, for example, SharePoint, you can add your donors to your, you can create a group on SharePoint, for example, and add your donors, and where you can be giving them real-time updates. But if I will answer your question directly, currently there is nothing like that on TechSoup. Maybe in the future we will have that, but there's no guarantee for now.
Okay. Okay, no problem. I was just wondering, maybe TechSoup has it. So that's at least it's something that I can key into. That's why I was asking.
Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you also. So I think we are getting towards the end, and I don't want to let my facilitators just go like that. I have a simple question to them. So maybe Theo can go ahead, and when he is done, he also add his closing remarks. Charles also. But before I ask the question, the question also goes to the participants in a way, and I would like the participants to put their response in the chat box whilst the presenters open their mics to answer us directly. So my question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate nonprofit readiness for similar crisis in the future? And participants can also put their rating, so from 1 to 10, in a scale of 1 to 10, based on their experience, what they have experienced while Corona hits, on how would they rate their readiness, their own readiness, and the readiness of other nonprofits. Charles and Theo, anybody can go, and please add your closing remarks as well.
I like to go after Charles, so Charles.
Charles, go ahead.
Theo, I was about to say the same thing. Oh, wow. This is an interesting question. I would say now, back in the days, I would have said 3. Now, I'll say 6 and fighting hard to get to 7. That's how I'll answer that question. So we are 6, fighting hard. Maybe I should say 6.5, 6.6. We've done so well. I think we need to pat ourselves in the back. Over the 1 year, we've moved from at least 3 to, I think we are now around 6. If I'm being optimistic, yeah.
Charles, please, since you are, we are from participants, we are only receiving the rating, but I think you can add something small. Why did you say 6 and we are fighting to 7?
Okay, because I'm looking at nonprofits in their diversity and then looking at the context of each. You see, you can easily use a certain measurement based on what you think is standard. If you're using a standard measurement, I'll probably say 0. You understand what I'm saying? But I don't believe that's a fair assessment. People should be assessed based on where they were and how far they've come, based on their resources and their context. So based on the diversity of the ecosystem and the resources and context, I think there's been a gradual shift from an average of 3 to 6. That's why I'm saying this. But I'm an optimistic person. You know, people say I'm quite generous, so maybe that's the issue.
Okay. Charles, I think thank you so much. You shouldn't add your closing remark yet. I've learned that there's a question in the chat box for you. So Theo, you can go on. You can come and then I ask that question later. Thank you.
Yes, sure. So to build on Charles's point again, like I've done this afternoon, is we've gotten to 7, but we will also really need to work as quickly and as as excellently as possible to get to 8 or 9, because the truth is that the world is moving really fast, and remote work has come to stay. So we have to adapt. I think what will be helpful is training, for some of the NGOs in the space. I found this forum very helpful. Waxy sharing the experience. Charles' presentation was great. TechSoup definitely is in the space to help. If you could reach out to more NGOs, that would be helpful. I think if you look at the chat section, there are lots of people, or at least I saw some questions from some people who were asking questions. Sometimes even the concept of remote working is still new to some people. So training will be very helpful, and then maybe for the NGOs too, I think funding for training would also be helpful. When we talk to our funders, we can make it a point to bring it up, as challenges that we face as an organization. We can let them know that remote working is new to us. If they can give us funds for that, that's great. Otherwise, the organization will have to look internally and see if you can allocate some amount of money, for personal or professional development in that space. It doesn't take a lot. There are also a lot of free training materials online, Coursera. Like I said, some of these tools even have tutorials, but leadership might have to like take the lead in trying out these tools before they can roll it out to staff. So training is a big part. Reach out to other NGOs, leverage on the network, and hopefully we can all make that leap from 7 to 9, hopefully to 10, in the not too distant future. All right, thank you.
I can see you're also very generous, like Charles. Okay, so I think Theo, you can give us your closing remarks, and then Charles will respond to the last question and give us his closing remarks. But before then, I would like participants to give us in one word or a short phrase, a phrase, maybe 1 or 2 words, what they have learned, their takeaway from the period of working remotely when there was the lockdown and all that. So a short phrase, maybe something like challenging, something like we have overcome, something like that, So yeah, Phil, you can give us your closing remarks. Thank you.
Sure. So first of all, I'd like to say a really big thank you to the team at WACC. I found this really helpful. I have also learned a lot from Charles with regards to like when I go back to my team, there's definitely some things that can happen. Explaining the process to people even further, making sure you are strengthening the systems that will encourage remote working. So I think this has been really helpful. Thank you to the organizers. The questions that came in were also helpful, thought-provoking questions. So I encourage this kind of forum to happen from time to time so that we can, share our experiences and help build, the capacity of other organizations to deliver on their mandates wherever they are. So thank you so much for your time. It's been a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Phil. Charles, before you give your closing remark, there is a question to you directly that said, do you think there should be a new organizational management structure developed to this era and for NGOs, especially for the ones in the rural and urban areas?
This is a thesis question, but let me attempt. I think that, for me, I've always believed that if there's a change in external situation, which has influenced the way you operate or influenced your strategy, it means that your structure should also change to respond to the change in that strategy. So if there's a change in that strategy, because now we are working remotely and things are different, then yes, there must be a change in the structure so that you can achieve that new objective in this new environment. So yes, but to be specific on what that structure should look like will be very difficult, because I always believe that people should look at their own circumstances and then alter their structure or adapt the way they think it will suit them. But it should help them achieve their new strategy and help them function in this new environment. So that's how I'll answer that question.
Thank you, Charles. You can add your closing remarks.
No, I mean, just to say thank you to colleagues for inviting me to speak here. Thanks also for Theo for availing himself from Saha Global. We've learned so much from him, and also thanks to all the colleagues who are on this call, taking out time to participate, ask questions. I'm so excited about what I've seen is people's energy and embracing this new era. Because a lot of the times there's been a certain perception of a phobia towards issues around technology and virtual space. But I think we are overcoming that phobia, and we're going to prove to people that even within this country or within this region, whether it's Ghana, Nigeria, Togo, and wherever in the region, Sierra Leone, Cote d'Ivoire, we are ready to embrace this new era and to make sure that our organizations will thrive. So I'm really excited about this. And just like what Theo said, I think we need more of these conversations and more capacity building in this area. So I think it's a challenge to my colleagues in the technology department led by my colleague Stella. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Charles. And thank you, Theo. I think it wouldn't be fair not to read the rating of our colleagues in the chat. So one person was not really generous. He said 1. Somebody said we received 6, 7. We even received 5. And Samira said 7 for my organization, but for others, perhaps 5. I mean, maybe looking at how far they have come. She has given 7 to her organization. We received 6, 7, and many more. A lot of 8, and I'm impressed. 6. So for the word, some said challenging, but wealthy experience, exciting. Remote working has been a great learning and exciting experience. Exciting has come again. Yes, so I think those are the words. I said words, some people gave me a thesis. So yeah, I think that has been that. Thank you so much. I really want to thank the facilitators and the participants. You have been the numbers, you kept the numbers. I mean, we have received high number from the beginning till the end, and we really want to thank you. And we are also excited that we are able to stay in the 2-hour span. Thank you so very much.
Hello. Okay. Stella,
yes.
I'm sorry I came in too late, and everybody was engaged, and I didn't want to disturb. Let me use this opportunity to say thank you for the organizers. You've been doing so well, even outside the webinars. I've been on WhatsApp chatting and guiding us on how to go about subscribing to this system. And we want to appreciate and believe that subsequently there will be such opportunities for webinars where we'll participate fully. We are just sorry for our inability to make it on time today. Subsequently, we've seen the very great impact and how useful this webinar is. I will not take chances next time. Thank you so much, Stella. This is Dixon from Nigeria.
Hi, Dixon, and thank you so much. So we will be also sharing the recording of the session with you, or so that those who cannot join us from the beginning can also be part. So we will also inform you that next month we'll be having another webinar, and we hope that you will be there as usual. Thank you all very much, and have a great afternoon, evening, wherever you are joining us from. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, Charles.
Bye, Charles.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
It was such a wonderful webinar. Thanks to the team. Bye.
Thank you for your presence. Bye.